All right, so welcome everybody. So glad you're here. And I am going to give a brief presentation on the principles of Ayurveda that allow us to understand good health. And then we're going to have a look at the actual Ayurvedic cleanse. So I do hope you go away with some information, whether or not you do the cleanse. I hope you find this informative. We see here Lord Dhanvantari, who is the patron lord of Ayurveda, considered to be the one who brought Ayurveda to us. And in Sanskrit below, in Devanagari, you see Om Shri Dhanvantari Namaha. And that is our blessing for tonight's session. So here we go. And so this home cleanse is something that I'm doing for the second time with a group. It's something that I've done myself quite a lot. And we had such great success and actually a lot of fun doing it last time. And there may be a few people joining us later who have actually done the cleanse already. And several of the people who had done the cleanse before are actually going to be doing it again. And so hopefully we'll hear from some of them later on. So let's have a look at why you are here and to see what it is that might have brought you to do something like this. If you want to just take a brief moment and reflect on that and just have a sense of what is it that might have made me consider doing this? What's my motivation? Somebody has the, Bija, I think you have your microphone on. Please mute yourself.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that way we can have a clean and calm recording for everyone. So if everyone can stay muted during the session, we'll have a good recording for those who aren't here. And so just have a moment to reflect on why you're here, what it is that might have you wanting to do something like a detox or some kind of a resetting of your digestion. What is it that's going on either in your health or in your life that might have brought you here? So we'll have a look at those questions coming up. And then also we'll have a look at why I'm here, what it is that brought me to do this and why I should even be considering myself as qualified to help you do these kinds of things. And we'll look also at why we should do a regular cleanse. So there's a method to this madness, and Ayurveda has some very, very good reasons for why we should take care of our body in such a consistent way. So just please make sure that you're all muted so we have a nice clean sound. So just double check that you haven't unmuted yourself, as I'm hearing people in the background. And then why 4 weeks? So the initial cleanse is 28 days. So we'll have a look at why it should be that long. There's a shorter cleanse that is 14 days. So we'll have a look at the logic behind both of them. And then what can we expect after 1 month? So, and then finally, what does it cost? So all the nuts and bolts we'll also have a look at as well. And then let's have a look at why you're here, first of all. So maybe it's because you want to find out how to resolve a health issue that might be there. Or you don't feel so good, even though you're doing everything right, in air quotes, and you're eating all the good foods and doing all the right things in your day-to-day life, and still something's not quite right. And maybe you're healthy, but there's just this thing that keeps you feeling a little bit stuck or frustrated. And a great reason also is to maintain your good health and prevent disease. So Ayurveda is very strong on prevention and maintaining health. And perhaps you want to help a loved one to improve their health. That can be for somebody else rather than for you. And you might just be curious about how an Ayurvedic detox protocol works, what it actually entails. And we're going to look at that in a very general way. This is something that is not as detailed as the Panchakarma, but we'll have a look at what that might look like. And then maybe you were told to be here. Maybe somebody who loves you said you must do this because it's necessary. You need to take good care of yourself. So whatever that is, whatever the reason is for you, welcome. And here's something I'd like you to reflect on now, which is if you had better health right now, what would be possible for you? What would you be able to do if your health were better? How would you feel different? And how does that even look to you? What does it even look like if your health is good, or in your idea, or in your vision for yourself? What would even that be for you? I'm going to ask one more time that everybody mute themselves, because I'm hearing quite a lot of sound in the call, and it's distracting. So please make sure that you switch off your microphone.
Susan, you can mute Daniela.
I see. Let me have I'm going to go into the.
You go to View, Manage Participants,
Yeah,
and
got
mute.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, thank you very much. That's lovely. Okay. All right. So let's just envisage that for just a moment as well. So why are you here? And then what would it look like to you to have better health? If you were to feel better in your life, what would even that be like for you? So just taking a moment now to really reflect on that, what that might be for you, and what might be possible for you. And so why am I here? You may well ask. I'm here for many, many reasons. I discovered Ayurveda probably in the early 1990s through yoga. I've been practicing yoga since 1985, and Ayurveda at that time was very, very fringe, and yet it was still present. It was still there. There were only a couple of small time players, let's say, on the scene, who are still on the scene. Deepak Chopra was the first one who I read books from about Ayurveda. And that piqued my curiosity in 91, 92. But it wasn't until I met Dr. Lad, Vasad Lad, in 1996, and I became much more motivated to do more, learn more. And he is who I consider to be my principal teacher. And it was from 1997, really. In 1996 and 1997, I had really bad health. I had started to have really big issues with food intolerances and skin rashes and all kinds of horrible things. I had taken a number of vaccines in 1996 because at the time I was working for the European Commission and having to travel to Central Asia, and they required certain vaccines for me to travel. And because I took several in a very short period of time, I reacted very badly, and I became quite unwell, and had a long period of time with what I would describe now as chronic fatigue, and certainly poor digestion. And poor digestion, I think I've had since childhood. And because that in the Western medical circles, certainly back then, 40, 50 years ago, nobody was really listening or caring about the digestive woes of the patients. It wasn't really considered a health issue in those days. I think there's a limited extent to which it's considered a health issue today, not to the degree that Ayurveda considers it. And so I went for many, many years with problems with digestion, and which led to other complications like those food intolerances and skin rashes and so on. And then in those years of becoming more and more interested in yoga, even starting to teach yoga and eating really well, taking good care of myself in principle, I actually started to wonder why, if I'm doing all these things right, I still wasn't feeling well. And it took me a while, because I really had to understand, or let's say have the courage to live according to what I needed for good health. And that was very different to what society and certainly my group of friends were doing. And so it took me a little while to really get things tweaked to the point where I felt confident that I could just do what I had to do for my health. And also because I have a strong Vata tendency, so I'm Pitta Vata in terms of my dosha. I'll explain that in a moment. the Vata is increasing with age. I'm 55 now. Vata increases as we age. And so there's always something. There's always one thing. There's maybe my digestion, or I'm not sleeping well, or there's something, dry skin, or something. And so I'm always balancing and rebalancing myself. And it is really a constant thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. It's a constant thing that allows me to rebalance myself when I go out of balance. Ayurveda is also something that I use professionally. So I'm working with people, with clients, as well as in my family, with my friends. I'm helping people understand how they can get better with very little intervention, just practical changes. And the success is fantastic because you see people getting better using their own technology, using their own kitchen ingredients, very simple things, simple behavioral changes, simple adaptations to routine, for example, or to daily habits. And that's very satisfying. So I love doing this. I love being with people who are trying to make themselves feel better in their lives. And I love to be able to help them do that. And then, of course, I understand how these protocols work. I've done many, many panchakarmas. I've done many rasayanas, which I'll explain shortly as well. I have been going to India since 1996, 97, and virtually every year for the last 15 years. In fact, many years, 2 or 3 times a year. And so often when I go, I will also take time to do a detox, a panchakarma, usually minimum 2 weeks and usually 4 weeks program. So I'm quite familiar with the whole protocol and with the program that might be necessary for anybody here. And also I can really attest to how well it works. So I'm going to give you just a brief background in terms of what Ayurveda is and all of the basic information. And I'm going to send you to a couple of videos that I've already published online, done for charity last year, and that are very complete in terms of a description of Ayurveda. So I won't take up your time now to do that. But Ayurveda, generally speaking, means science of life or knowledge of life. So Veda is another way of saying knowledge or science, understanding, and Ayur is Ayush is life. And so it's a complete medicine. It's complete because it factors in every aspect of our life. It factors in our relationships, our physical situation, our age, our doshas, obviously, as we look at balances and imbalances coming up, the environment that we live in, as well as our personal goals, meaning what type of life do we live? Do we want to be a professional, or are we staying at home with children? Are we a manual laborer, or are we somebody who sits at a desk most of the time? And all of that is necessary to understand so we can see to what extent we might need something quite different to another person to maintain good health, because of course our health depends on how we live our everyday life. And so Ayurveda is never going to tell somebody how to live their life. It's not that there's a dogmatic formula, but the idea is that when we see what it is that you consider your best life, we try to help you, support you going into that, in that direction. What the kind of life that you want to live, how can we make that optimal for you? And in that way, you can really learn yourself how to balance yourself. And so again, really briefly, Ayurveda recognizes 3 basic types of constitution known as Prakriti. And these are aspects of ourselves which we're born with. And when we're out of balance, those aspects are going to be affected one way or another. But we have a tendency, let's say, in one way or another. And these doshas are represented by Vata, which is air, and ether. Ether, or meaning space, if you like. And Vata is everything to do with movement, everything to do with the, pardon me, with the central nervous system, how we actually move, how we speak, for example. Like right now, my vata is being disturbed as I'm speaking. So there's an excess vata. I'm speaking quite a lot, and the vata is being deranged. And so there's an actual vata disturbance. You can hear it in my voice. And so what do? I take a drink of water. Water is kapha. And that kapha is going to pacify vata, because it's the opposite. Vata is dry, vata is edgy, vata is movement and overstimulation. Kapha is stable. Kapha represents water and earth, and balances vata because it's the opposite quality. And then in the middle, we see pitta. Pitta is fire, but it also is fire and water. And that is basically our digestion. So vata is all the movement through the nervous system. Pitta is our digestive system, particularly the digestive fire, but that also extends into our body temperature, etc. And then kapha is like the dense matter of the body. Everything that is solid and stable in the body is kapha. And we can see that in the elements. We can see that in this beautiful picture of the Swiss Alps here. This is in the region of Bern. And we can see water is there. We have the earth, we have the sky, and of course the sun, which is providing the fire. This is the most fundamental quality of life, and we are an aspect of that. So our body and our way of interplaying with the environment is simply a reflection of the environment. We're no different from it. We're just we sense ourselves as distinct from it, but it's actually an illusion. We're just simply part of it, interplaying with the same environment. So with these doshas, most people have roughly two that are more predominant, and then there will be one that's less dominant. And then some people will have all three, which is known as tridoshic. And some people are much more predominantly one, and then less so of two. And that you'll see in their behavior, you'll see it in their physical body, you'll see it in the way they speak, and you'll see it in the way that they think. And so for my own example, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a Pitta Vata. And that means that both my body and my imbalances reflect Pitta and Vata quite strongly. And Kapha is very, very low. And so my tendency is to be busy, to be engaged and running around, to be, for example, now teaching and presenting things, speaking quite a lot. Pitta is all about telling people what to do, bossing them around, telling them how to do cures and things like this. And Vata is all about the movement behind that. It's the inspiration behind all of that. And Kapha is stable. Kapha is the energy that keeps us grounded and stable. And so because I don't have a natural tendency towards Kapha, I have to create that in my life. I have to find it in the way that I live my life. And that comes from having, for example, a solid routine. It comes from knowing that I need to rest at certain times. It comes from the way that I eat food, because I know that eating Kapha types of food will help balance the vata. And this is what I hope to teach you as well. So although I have the tendency, I know how to balance myself out. So your basic constitution, as I mentioned, is known in Sanskrit as prakriti. It's the foundation of your health and your personality. And whatever that is, we are operating from that point in the world, whether that be physically, emotionally, intellectually. It's how you live your life. It's how you sustain yourself through life. And it's also how you engage with people, the energy that you put behind your relationships. And this doesn't change. This is something you've inherited from your parents. You don't have a choice in the matter. You don't have a say in the matter. And if you look at your parents, you will see yourself reflected. And we see that very classically, very often with kids. We see that they are really so similar to one or another, or maybe both of their parents. And then your current dosha is the excess or the insufficiency. So dosha actually means an imbalance or something that is not in the right quantity. And so we're not going to focus enormously during this cure on knowing what your constitution is, knowing what your dosha is. We're going to look at the principles, particularly in the beginning. As we get deeper in, especially in the 28-day cleanse, we have much more time for that to get into the doshas. But we're going to look more at the principles which will help to balance your health. And so what we're interested in is, what is the health imbalance? And not so much what is the original constitution. And I'll explain shortly why. Because for all of us, we have a particular pattern of how our health goes out of balance. And therefore, bringing it back in balance is actually quite easy if we follow certain guidelines and principles. And that brings us to this point, which is, why would we even want to do a cleanse? Why would we do anything like what I'm proposing to you now? And this is because we live in this crazy Vata deranged world that really pushes us towards unhealthy levels of stress, unhealthy levels of toxicity. We are not taking time to eat properly. We're not taking time to rest and exercise properly. We're not even taking time for our relationships, and including our relationship with ourselves. And because this life is so fast-paced now, and because especially if we're living in an urban environment, it's so intense, it's really very difficult to change habits and lifestyles on our own. And so we need a kind of a structure that helps us to do that. It helps us to kind of find our place and sort of calibrate, as it were, and to be able to reconstitute ourselves over, whether it be 4 weeks or just the 2 weeks. And in Ayurveda, it's understood that there are 3 main causes of disease. And this is what you'll see very clearly when you understand. These are, by the way, thousands of years old, these ideas. And these causes of disease are written in texts like the Charaka Samhita, which is 3,500 years old in written form. And they were known well before this. And so you'll see that humanity has not changed very much. It's just, I think, perhaps we're in a more intense version of life, but we still have these human tendencies, and it's Ayurveda's understanding that we are causing ourselves disease because of these human tendencies. So let's have a look. The first one is acting against wisdom and common sense. In Sanskrit, there's this wonderful word which is prajnaparada, which is literally a crime against wisdom. And it's a great concept to remember because, and we all know this, of course, because when we do something that we know is not healthy for us, we still expect a positive result. We still expect a good result. And so we might have really bad habits, day-to-day habits, or we might eat things that we know are not really healthy for us. Or perhaps it's in the way that we do things, rushing around and, for example, not going to the toilet in time. Even Ayurveda will talk about not sneezing or not coughing when the body needs to do so. And all of that suppression is actually causing an increase of Vata. You'll see very shortly how important Vata is to the beginning of disease. The second cause is an unhealthy relationship of our senses. So the eyes, the ears, the sight, the smell, etc. And that unhealthy relationship of the senses to the sense objects. So for example, our sense of taste and food. We eat to have something that tastes really good, rather than eating because we know something's healthy. We might actually find that the food that we're eating is only just really tasty, but causing us illness. So that's not a healthy relationship. Or for example, drinking too much wine or beer or Coca-Cola or whatever, or too much chocolate, maybe too many chips and all kinds of processed food. Whatever it is, we have perhaps a taste for too much sweet or too much salty, usually, or perhaps too much sour, typically. And then that throws us off balance. And then with the eyes, for example, if we're on computers all day long, and I'm sorry I'm keeping you here, telling you not to do it, but here we are. If you're too much on screens, if you're too much in a space where you're not seeing bright daylight and you're not enjoying a good vision of, say, distance and sky and forest and so on, your eyes become really sore, and this causes imbalance as well. And those imbalances are not just at the level of the sight or the eyes, but they go deeper into our neurological system. And then the third cause of disease is an improper adaptation to seasonal changes. And this is why we do these cleanses at what are known as these sandhya moments, these moments of change, the joining between the seasons. Whether that be, for example, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're moving out of the summer season and into the autumn season. In India, for example, moving out of the rainy season and into what feels like spring, and moving away from the wet and damp and towards the dry and warm weather, which eventually gets cooler even in India. It's all relative. And when we don't adapt to those changes, however subtle they might be, we also suffer. And therefore, the modern life that we have, which is all about air conditioning and about eating strawberries in January and about doing whatever it is that we feel like doing in the moment that we're doing it, is actually a massive source of imbalance for us and therefore disease. And we see it pretty easily in society around us. We can see how people are becoming really unwell. Ayurveda says if the diet is wrong, medicine is useless. And if the diet is right, then medicine is unnecessary. And this is where food comes in. So food is extremely important in Ayurveda. The home cleanse, I would say, is probably 60% based on food. And the rest is based on guidelines that are to do with wisdom around your daily habit. We're going to look also at meditation, yoga, and all these things that will support us in our good health. But fundamentally, if the food is wrong, nothing that you do is going to actually help you. And so taking all these pills as we do in the West to try and heal disease is not really working. And in fact, in many cases, actually is actively hurting people. There are hundreds of thousands of people only in the United States alone every single year who die having taken their prescriptive medicines according to their doctor's orders. So the medicine is adding to a problem that is already there. It's not helping us at all. And so we want to get really, really basic. We want to strip right back to the bare bones. And we do simplify quite a lot in the first few days of the cleanse. We go right back to understanding the basics of what we need, what we must eat, for example, and how we should be doing that before we carry on into the cleanse. So in our modern life, our everyday choices throw us off balance. So it's these little things that accumulate. Sometimes you hear people say, I caught a cold, or he got cancer out of the blue. He got a cancer diagnosis, or he just dropped dead from a heart attack. He didn't know he had any problems. And this cannot be possible. Because if we're paying attention to our health, if we're paying attention to our body, we can really sense what's happening in every step along the way. So one of the things that we're going to look at is these little everyday choices that we make, as well as including becoming more intuitive, becoming much more sensitive to what we need in our bodies and in our health to actually support ourselves long term. And so these little choices, let's call them social pressures, let's say, or maybe obligations according to how we need to live our lives with children, maybe work obligations and so on, are going to affect us in such a way that it causes a toxicity in the body. And this is what in Ayurveda is known as ama. Ama is a way of describing whatever is left undigested. It's what the body can't use. And that also includes what the mind can't use, what our heart cannot process. And so that information overload or emotional overload also causes ama in the body. And although it starts at a subtle level, on the emotional level, for example, it ends up in a gross level, and then the body can actually respond. So, for example, if we take deep grief and loss, that overload of emotion that might be blocked then and is not being healed will slowly have consequences on the heart. And the heart stops functioning properly. Our circulation doesn't work properly. The arteries might start to atrophy or become clogged. Our digestion doesn't work anymore. And this is what leads to heart disease. But the original cause may have been emotional. So this ama, this toxicity, clogs up the body. It stops things from moving through the body in the way that they need to, so that we can assimilate our nutrition, so that we can use our energy, which we have in abundance. And it also blocks information in the form of hormones, for example. And our body, of course, needs that circulation to thrive. And an example of ama being created is eating while standing, something so simple as that, or eating too fast and not chewing properly causes ama. Because when we stand to eat, our stomach is stressed, our digestive system is stressed and prepared for action. It's not prepared to receive food and assimilate the nutrition. And if we're eating fast and not chewing properly, then the process of digestion, which should begin in the mouth, is left up to the stomach. And if there's too much food going in and the digestive capacity is low, then the food just sits there and we won't be able to assimilate it. And so digestion slows down, toxicity increases, and it builds up over time. And ama also builds up by having too much stress and not sleeping well. And ama can even accumulate by not moving around enough, by sleeping too much. So there's all kinds of different ways for these toxic wastes to accumulate. And we want to find out what is the root cause, what's the reason behind any toxicity that you might be carrying or that anyone you know might be carrying. And most of the time, it is just related to these little choices, what we consider to be unimportant. If you were to say to a Western doctor that eating and working at your computer, or eating well, running from the car to an appointment is problematic, most of them would consider that to be minor. And only a few who might be aware of the degree of stress response in the body might consider that to be problematic and might say, no, you really must calm down and eat in a quiet space that is pleasant and enjoy your food so that your body can take it in. But unfortunately, we don't usually get this kind of advice, even though eating in stress like that overstimulates the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. It's where we have an enormous amount of energy to save ourselves in case we're in danger. But our nervous system can't tell the difference between standing up and eating, or eating and walking, for example, and a genuine nervous threat to, or rather a threat to our life. So we want to eat when we're engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what happens when we can sit down and relax, not talk so much while we eat, chew our food, digest slowly, perhaps listen to nice music, and do something that actually supports that whole process. So the first stage, pardon me, I think we've missed a slide there. Ayurveda is recognizing 6 stages of illness. And this is quite important because Ayurveda is very rare in this case, understanding this degree of subtlety of where illness actually begins. And this is why working in such a way as we do with the cleanse, we can address problems before they actually become problems. We can address what Ayurveda senses would become an illness before it actually starts to affect the body. And this is the ideal, working with prevention rather than having to try to cure. And so we start by understanding the first stage, which is the phase of accumulation. And this is where imbalance starts. It's where all imbalance and all ill health will begin. And it will always be because of poor digestion. And what I've just described affects digestion, that stress, that running around, not eating properly, not chewing properly, not having the right food, not using our senses properly, not adjusting to the seasons, not adjusting to the time of day or bedtimes and all these things that help. It will cause disruption in our digestion. And so that accumulation phase is where most people ignore the problems because it doesn't feel like a really big deal. Vata imbalances will lead to Pitta and Kapha imbalances. So Vata is dominant. It is the first dosha to go out of balance because it's responsible for movement, because it's responsible for the central nervous system. Vata allows you to digest. It allows you to move hormones through the body. It allows you to circulate the blood. That energy of Vata is there in everything that stimulates the actions of the body. And when Vata is out of balance, it will lead to an imbalance with Pitta, meaning the body regulation through digestive fire or through the temperature of the body, through the thyroid, for example. And then Kapha imbalances, meaning that there's an excess of phlegm because there's too much cold and damp in the body, or an excess of accumulation in the circulatory system, for example, as I mentioned, for example, amyloid plaque that can build up in the arteries, this kind of thing. And all of it is starting because of these minor, everyday little things that we don't really pay attention to. So during the cleanse, especially, we're going to put a lot of attention on how to adjust our lives, still living our lives and still enjoying what we're doing, but with a much more mindful way of understanding what we need for good health. So Vata's domain, or the seat, if you like, of Vata, is the colon. And so everything, we could also say, everything begins in the colon. All disease, all disruption begins in the colon. And science is now clear about this. So remember that what I'm describing here from Ayurveda's point of view is thousands of years old. And really, in the last 15 or 20 years, Western research, I can't quite say Western medicine because it takes a while for medicine to catch up to the research, but certainly biological research is showing us a lot about how much the gut impacts our overall health. The bacteria in the colon are extremely important for our overall health balance, and the elimination of food through the colon is extremely important. And if the colon is not eliminating properly, it's going to perforate, and you end up with what is called leaky gut. This will affect the colon as well as the small intestine. And then those toxins end up recirculating through the body from the place where they're supposed to be eliminated. And so there's a vicious circle going on where the body is trying to eliminate and at the same time intoxicating itself and overburdening the organs of elimination. And all of that because the Vata domain has been upset. Pitta's domain is the intestine, so the small intestine. Pitta is also responsible for the liver, so the processing of bile. Another way of describing Pitta is bile, actually. It's what breaks down the food. If ever you've been ill enough to be coughing up bile, you know that it has a very bitter and a very hot quality. And those are the qualities of Pitta. And so we can also see that in the types of food that we eat. And if we eat too much bitter, too much hot food, or heating food, we also imbalance Pitta, it becomes too intense. And so when Pitta goes off balance, then we have problems of inflammation. And the inflammation can spread from the digestion all the way through the body into the joints, for example. Kapha's domain is in the stomach. So Kapha, of course, all of these have aspects of imbalance throughout the whole body, but these are the seats of each of these doshas. And Kapha is in the stomach. And the stomach is what? It's water. It's full of moisture, and that's the Kapha, the predominant energy. And that Kapha energy is where that assimilation of nutrition starts. So having this digestive fluid with the heat of Pitta and the movement of Vata is extremely important, and having all three in balance is extremely important. So if we imagine that For example, there's too much kapha, and if you have a problem with, for example, excess mucus in the body, excess fluid, we end up with colds, head colds, for example. We might end up with hay fever. We might end up with mucus in different ways. The mucus can be in the nasal cavity or in the ear canal, or it could be even in the stool. And if you have mucus in the stool, you are getting a really clear example of having a kapha imbalance. So, and then when we see stage 2, this is aggravation. This is when the problem is there for a little bit too long, and now things are getting worse because there's an accumulation of the doshas. So when vata is in good balance, it will help to move the energy through the body. And when it's out of balance, the energy stagnates. And so, for example, inflammation will stagnate and accumulate in different parts of the body if vata cannot circulate energy properly. And so things are going to get worse if these problems are ignored. And as the symptoms are worsening and that imbalance increases, we start to become less and less well. And we're still at a stage where we're perfectly functional, where we might not even really be paying attention to these things, to these sensations or symptoms. And yet it is the beginning of disease. And this will continue until we put our attention on how to make it stop. And then spread is where things start to go in different parts of the body. So we saw that vata accumulates in the colon, but then vata can move in different parts of the body. So vata, for example, if it moves from the colon into the lower back, will cause back pain. And so we have a vata disorder that causes pain in the back or pain in the joints, for example. And so they leave their domain. Pitta will leave the intestine, for example. The pitta will spread through the body, causing inflammation and heat, possibly in the blood. Too much bile, an overheated liver that's not doing its job, inflammation of the skin, for example, inflammation of the joints. And so you get a kind of a rheumatoid arthritis. And for example, as vata is building up in the colon, this might lead to constipation. Vata is dry, it's cool and dry and windy. And if you have frequent constipation, that can in and of itself cause low back pain because the body's not eliminating properly. And that causes an enormous amount of stagnant energy. And we need to keep things moving through the descending colon, especially to avoid that accumulation of vata. And by the way, this is the phase where detoxing becomes absolutely necessary, and it gives really fast results. So when we detox from this phase, it's easy to reverse these problems. If we leave things a little bit later, that becomes more difficult. The infiltration stage is where Dr. Ladd would say, oh dear. Symptoms become localized as the accumulated doshas move into places where there is now ama, or this weakness in the body. Another way we could speak about ama, by the way, would be chronic inflammation. So when ama has accumulated and we're not able to release that, as I mentioned earlier, the heat of pitta and the stagnancy of kapha and the irregularity or the instability of vata will produce a kind of a chronic inflammation. And this can be in all kinds of different aspects of our body. And that can provoke a weakness in the immune system. And because these changes are accumulating over time, we often think that these things are natural to getting older. So we think, oh, well, I'm indigested. I have indigestion because naturally as I get older, my digestion gets weaker. Or I have aches and pains, but it's normal because I'm 50. Or, you know, I don't remember things as well, or my brain is a little bit muddled, and that's normal because I'm getting older. And in fact, none of these things are normal and none of them are necessary as well. The fifth stage is manifestation. So now we can see a qualitative change in our physical body. Now we can actually really see that there's something happening that is affecting our overall well-being. And this is where a Western medical doctor would say, oh, now you've got something. Now you've got an illness that they can measure and identify with some kind of blood test or some other type of measurement. Whereas prior to stage 5, they're not really too bothered. They're not really too interested in the symptoms. But Ayurveda is saying we must pay attention to these symptoms prior to these stages, where at this point it becomes hard to reverse. And so when you go to the doctor with stage 5 manifestation, you end up with some kind of prescription or perhaps an invasive procedure. And if we want to do this from the point of view of Ayurveda, it's absolutely possible, but it will take time. It can take, for example, up to a year if you have a really strong case of inflammation, or if you have a really difficult problem with leaky gut, for example, or other kinds of digestive issues. And so that imbalance is hard to reverse. But it's not impossible. And that's the good news. It just takes commitment and time. And then at stage 6, we have an actual distortion of the body that will manifest in something that's really obvious, a tumor, for example. This would be, for example, if you've seen people who have serious arthritic problems, you see an inflammation of the joints, you'll see a deformation of the joints. This would be at this stage, at the 6th stage, which is really a chronicity of the illness that becomes almost impossible to reverse. Again, potentially possible to reverse, but we don't want to get to this stage, because now this becomes a preoccupation and our quality of life suffers. We become more dependent on medicine or doctors or other people to live day to day. And this is where we find things like cancers, diabetes, autoimmune diseases of all kinds. And again, this is in the Western model, this is at the point at which they will identify this as illness, but not quite before, which is a great shame. So this is Dr. Ladd's drawing of these 6 stages that I've just described. So if we start up at the top, on the upper left, you can see this kind of leaking tap. He's described it as a leaking tap. It's like, okay, it still functions. It's still okay. It might be dripping. It's no big deal. It's just dripping a little bit. But that's the problem that causes everything else. So this leaking tap is now provoking the imbalance of the dosha, the accumulation, samchaya, which is moving the toxins throughout the body, the spread, prasara, which is moving the doshas into parts of the body where the doshas should not really be. And as that dosha or that imbalance is moving through the body, it causes localized problems. And especially, for example, in the sandhya points, in the joints, in the points of connective tissue, that's where we're going to find the biggest problems. And then eventually we're going to see destruction of tissue. Things are going to start to break down. And so we're really looking to work as much as possible throughout life at stages 1, 2, and 3, where we can really catch the little subtle imbalances of things that we can see every day are not functioning optimally, not yet ill, and yet potentially going to make us ill if we don't pay attention to it. And this is where the cleanse becomes a really wonderful tool for staying well. So Ayurveda suggests seasonal and daily routines to maintain good health, long life, and spiritual growth. So Ritucharya is a season. Acharya is like a mastery or understanding or working with something. So working with the seasons. And then Dinacharya is the daily routine. Din is a day. And mastering your day, looking out for the routines of the day. And notice that spiritual growth is mentioned here. So one of the main purposes of life, according to Ayurveda, is our spiritual growth. And so we're not here just to be doing day-to-day householder things. We're also here as spiritual beings, and we're here to be happy and to explore that side of ourselves which is invisible to anyone else, which only we can relate to. And so our good health is also a part of that spirituality. So our good health is physical, it's emotional, it's psychological, and spiritual. And Ayurveda takes care of all of that through various different means, whether it be meditation or mantra chanting, or of course the physical treatments of the body, as well as the different diets and things that we can do to help the body through exercise. And good health means regular bowel movements and good digestion, a feeling of being light and energetic, and clear eyes and clear skin. This is a really obvious outer manifestation of good health. But it's also having a good sense of self, having good discernment and intuition. Being able to trust one's instinct depends on having a healthy gut. As we say in English, you trust your gut. And you can't trust your gut if your gut is not functioning properly. So it's literally blocking our channels of perception if we are not functioning properly. And then good health also represents a feeling of basic contentment or santosha with life, and a happy, independent, and being happy with life, independent of outer circumstances. Whatever is going on in the world can be whatever it is, and it doesn't necessarily disturb your overall balance of happiness. Of course, your moods can fluctuate. That's not what Ayurveda is saying, in the same way as yoga or any other spiritual practice. We have an emotional connection to life as well. But the main thing is that it should not be predominant. It should not stagnate, and it should not be overexcited. For example, stagnation of emotions would be kapha. Getting angry, getting upset, getting violent would be pitta. And then getting hyperactive or anxious or neurotic is vata. And if we see our lovely sadhu here on the side, this is a gentleman that I encountered in Guptkashi in the Himalayas many years ago, maybe 15 years ago now. And I just was coming up from the basin of the tirtha of a temple there. And as I approached coming up the stairs, I just was so enchanted by his incredible radiance and this incredible glow that I took this photograph, which he was perfectly fine with. And I was so really taken by his incredible energy, what we call ojas in Ayurveda. Ojas is vitality. It's a kind of an aura of well-being. And here he was, obviously, somebody in his, I'm going to say 60s, hard to say, but I would suggest he's in his 60s at this point, and absolutely vibrant. And certainly at the time that I took that photograph, I felt he was certainly 10 times as vibrant as I felt it at that time. And so I used this photograph both for myself to remember what ojas can look like in physical manifestation, as well as to demonstrate to others. So the ideal daily routine from an Ayurvedic point of view is to have good personal hygiene. And of course you would say, well, duh. But actually what Ayurveda means by that is in such a way that you keep all of the functions of the body working well. And so good hygiene, for example, would mean waking up and brushing your teeth and then scraping your tongue in that order. And scraping the tongue allows you to remove some of the accumulated ama from the sleeping overnight. And hopefully there's not much, there shouldn't be much, but that coating on the tongue could be white, could be yellow, could be even green or even black, depending on what the imbalance might be. Ideally, it should be very light and just a little bit of kind of a mild white coating. And if you're very, very healthy, you won't have any at all. But that's part of this daily routine. And washing the face, for example, washing the body, doing abhyanga, which is a massage of the body with some kind of oil that's appropriate for your body. We talk about all of these things in the cleanse. And then very importantly, the efficient elimination of waste. So you're ideally within an hour of getting up, or at least a couple of hours of getting up, you should be eliminating. Obviously, urinating for many people, most people, that's quite easy, but that also means defecating. So you're going to be passing stool within an hour to 2 hours of waking up. And if not, then you are already manifesting a vata imbalance. Moderate exercise is a part of every day. So Ayurveda suggests that light walking, light yoga, pleasurable movement is part of every day. And a healthy diet, obviously, healthy diet, and then especially timing of meals. So the daily routine, according to your needs and your lifestyle, would include a particular schedule that would help you to eat optimally at certain times. And then at some point in the day, ideally in the morning, but perhaps just before bedtime, cultivating a positive mental outlook. That would look like something like prayer or meditation, could be chanting, some kind of engagement with yourself, journaling, for example, doing some kind of gratitude journal, which now scientifically has been shown to really boost well-being. And this is part of everyday routine. And so as the seasons change, so should our behavior. So it's what we do every day should also adjust according to the weather, according to the climate, and according to the season that we're in. And that means our diet, first of all, most important. I'm going to repeat that until you can't stand hearing it anymore. Our sleep habits should change, and our work routine should adapt to the energy of the season. Now, in modern life, that's really, really challenging because for many people, if you're not working for yourself, you don't have a lot of control over these things. So you, of course, have to work within the constraints that you might have. Whatever constraints you have, you have. And so you have to either accept them or change them. And either way, there's a way to find a balance within all of that. So over years and years of accumulated stress, emotions and toxins have been stored in our body's fatty tissues. What happens is if we're eating too frequently, for example, we start to accumulate fat because the body is no longer burning the fat as fuel. It's now burning the sugars and the carbohydrates that we're eating consistently throughout the day. Some nutritionists, even now, will recommend eating, for example, up to 6 meals a day, little meals a day. So when somebody shows a blood sugar imbalance, they will suggest eating more frequently, but in fact, the frequent eating is the cause of the blood sugar imbalance. And so the more that people will do that, the more they will accumulate ama and this fat, which is unnecessary. And even a very thin vata type person can have a lot of fat accumulation. They just won't look necessarily corpulent. They have fat rather than muscle tissue. And these stresses are stored in our cells. This is what Candace Pert called the molecules of emotion. And these stresses are actually accumulating over many years. And when we do a cleanse like the one I'm proposing, we're eliminating not only these physical toxins, but we're also eliminating emotional toxins and accumulated stresses. And so, especially through the 28-day cleanse, there's quite a lot of shedding. The shedding is not just weight or water, which can happen. In the previous cleanse, for example, the average weight loss, even for people who didn't want to lose weight, was 5 kilos. So the top weight loss, and this, by the way, was in the first 2 weeks. So we went 4 weeks, but the weight loss initially happened in the first 2 weeks. And then the greatest weight loss was 7 kilos, and another person had done 2, but most people were losing about 5 kilos, except for the people who were not trying to lose weight. But even a couple of them did actually lose weight. It's easier to lose weight, believe it or not, than to put it on. So that also is a factor in how we would do this. But as the weight is being shed, we're also shedding stresses. We're shedding emotions. We might even have memories come to the surface as the body is now processing what it had been holding on to. If you look at somebody who's gone through either an acute stress or a period of time in their life where they've been very stressed, you see that they start to look more dense. they start to look more packed in, as it were, more puffy, and they're holding so much in, and you can actually see that their body is amassing something, and that is this toxic accumulation that I'm talking about, and this is what we shed relatively quickly in these cleanses. For some people, of course, if it's extreme, it will take longer. Otherwise, it can actually happen quite quickly. And so it's ideal, really, to take some time to do this kind of elimination so that you're slowly winding down away from certain foods and habits, and then slowly adding on new ones while detoxing in a way that is long-term and sustainable. So it's not great to, stop your life, come to a screeching halt, and then, shut yourself indoors for 3 days and eat only, I don't know, broth or something like that. Of course, you can do that, but it's not going to bring you great long-term results, because when you establish a kind of a time frame and a structure with which you can start to shed all of these things, you're doing it very consciously, first of all. You're adjusting day to day, your dinacharya is being adapted, your day-to-day schedule is being adapted, and you're changing in terms of your attitude towards yourself, towards your food, towards your activities and your habits and so on. And all of this becomes much more sustainable. And equally, towards the end of a detox, if it's not ended properly, then those toxins that have been accumulated, which have been now pulled out of the tissues through the detox process, if they are not escorted out of the body, or chelated, as it's known, if they're not drawn out of the tissues before actually leaving the body, they just simply recirculate. And then you get into this kind of a loop where you may feel really good for the first few days. You start feeling a little bit less good after a little while. And if you've done your detox, but then gone right back into your same lifestyle and without any major change or adaptation period, you kind of end up at least where you were, and possibly even worse off, because now you have to deal with whatever you're consuming day to day, as well as all these toxins that are now again circulating in the body instead of having been evacuated. And so escorting all of that stuff out of the body is also part of the program. That's very important, that the types of food that we eat towards the end of the plan are really important in that regard. They're specifically designed to help draw toxins out of the body. And of course, that's something that you can eat at any time. They're not unusual foods. They're foods, for example, like coriander leaves, or cilantro, it's called in North America. And that is a wonderful way, for example, of chelating heavy metals and other toxins in the body. But there are many, many others. So we use tapioca, for example, fantastic food that is used in many, many cultures, but also happens to be a really wonderful detoxing food. And so we're going to use these foods really wisely to try and pull all the toxins that we've liberated out of the body. So it does take time for you and your digestion to find a new balance. So of course you can do like a simple 3 or 4 day thing and get great benefits. I do that myself, but I also have a relatively balanced lifestyle. So you can kind of jump in and jump out of these 3 or 4 day resets, because you're not taking yourself too far off course. For example, now in September, I would often do a grape fast. I would do a few days of eating nothing but grapes. And as I mentioned to some of you already, grapes and seasonal fruits of all kinds are going to feature quite a lot in this cleanse. Whereas, for example, in the spring cleanse, we don't eat fruit. We might take some dried dates, for example, but otherwise there's no fruit in the spring because it's just not available. And we're trying to eat seasonally to take the maximum nutrition out of the food, but also to use the food in the time of year that it's most appropriate for us. And of course, wherever you live, in the region that you live, you will be able to take that food according to what is best for you. It's worth noting that if you emigrated somewhere, and your first generation particularly, to wherever you emigrated, it's still a good idea to keep some of the foods that your ancestral, your family and your ancestral culture would have eaten, because we don't adapt that fast to new environments, especially if they're quite dramatically different. So it's really, I want you to understand that we're not just detoxing in the sense of getting rid of toxins and trying to feel good in the body, but we're really trying to build something long lasting. We're trying to build long, lifetime, long good habits. And especially my interest, especially because I'm fundamentally a teacher above all else, is that I want you to learn the principles of Ayurveda. So we're not just doing this thing, but I want you to also learn how to use these principles in your daily life. And that doesn't require eating a particular way or a type of food, but it's how you associate the food in your diet, how you are going to choose what you eat and how you eat it according to what you need. For example, I actually had somebody say to me, in all sincerity, I tried Ayurveda once and I didn't like the food. And I was so astonished because I thought, well, there's a lot of confusion in that sentence because it's not about a particular type of food, but it has to be said that ultimately Ayurveda is an Indian wisdom tradition. The Indian culture continues to make food in many ways according to Ayurvedic principles. And therefore, a lot of what really works in terms of the Ayurvedic food will be Indian or some kind of South Asian food, but it's not necessary. We can find equivalent foods in any culture, and we can adapt the food to what you might need, whether it be for food allergy reasons or preferences, and in such a way that you can actually continue to eat the way you'd like to eat, but ideally using as much spice and good flavor in your food as possible. So it's definitely not a program that is all about, for example, Indian cooking, although I happen to love it. So I also do contribute a lot of recipes coming from the Indian tradition. I will give you lots of different food options in the meantime. And then this is also for the people around you. So this is not just, it's not only your well-being, but your well-being and your family's well-being. So it's also helping the people around you to feel better about themselves, which in turn will make your life a lot more pleasant. And so what we're doing here is not just going to benefit you directly, which of course I do hope it will, but it's also so that you can share it and spread it around and say to people, when your friend is rushing with a sandwich, shoved in his or her mouth, rushing from one appointment to another, say, let's just take 5 minutes and sit down. Just sit down and eat. Don't rush your children off. You buy them an ice cream and then rush them off to the next appointment. Let them sit down and eat their ice cream. Don't make them walk with food. And a young child will never instinctively walk with food. You will never see that happen in a toddler. It's only when the parents educate that into them that they will start doing that. So starting to notice that human ingenuity, human intuition tells us already what we need to do. Sit still and eat your food like a good toddler. And then fundamentally, it's all about Agni. So the fire, the digestive fire, Agni is everything. Agni is life itself. If we don't have a good solid fire, we will not be healthy. And if you can imagine a bonfire or a campfire, you have, perhaps too much wood on the fire. If you keep putting more fuel, imagining ourselves adding more and more and more food to our stomach, we put the fire out. So the fire might have been great, but then we're adding so many logs as fuel that the fire just ends up dying off. And in the same way, if we don't add enough, the fire will also die out because we don't have enough fuel. And so understanding how to tend your fire is very important. Agni is so important that it is actually the first word of the first Veda of the Vedic tradition. So the Rig Veda, which is the very first Veda, begins with Agni. And this is because Agni is life. The sun itself is Agni. It's an expression of fire in the sky. And without it, none of us would be here. And so we have to understand that as a microcosm of the universe, we have this fire in us that is a reflection of nature itself, and we need to tend to that to help us stay well. And so we're going to learn a lot about how to protect our digestion, how to make the most of digestion so that we can actually consume our food really well. So digestibility, in this case, depends on the quantity of food, that's your fuel, the freshness of your food. Ayurveda suggests never to eat stale food. how you prepare food, the frequency of meals, the time of day that you eat, and your mood and your attitude around not only eating, but also how you even buy your food, how you decide, when and how to eat, and so on. And we're going to look at all of these different things because they really matter. And it sounds like a lot of fussiness, but it's definitely worth spending quite a bit of time on. So how is your digestion? So if you think about this for a moment, in anybody who thinks they might be quite healthy might still have problems with digestion. So do you experience bloating or gas after eating, or after eating certain foods, or constipation or diarrhea, or both, because sometimes that can happen, going back and forth, or cramping, or any kind of sense of prolonged fullness, kind of a feeling that you ate 3-4 hours ago, maybe 5 hours ago, and yet you're not digesting anything? And even after a small amount of food, that could be like that. Or do you feel really sleepy and sluggish and you have no energy? And especially if this happens right after eating, if you're eating something and you immediately feel tired after eating it, you know that your digestion is not working. Your digestive fire, the liver itself, is compromised, and you are now needing to do something about it, or it's going to lead to bigger problems. So it's time for a fresh start. It's time for something to change. And this home cleanse will bring those changes. It's something that is going to bring you something so livable, so practical, and so profound that you'll be able to continue with this long beyond these 28 days, or even if you just do the 14 days, long beyond this period of time, because we're talking about principles that you can relate to other aspects of your life. So you will experience better health, more graceful aging, and an uplifted mood and mental outlook. So we know that the emotional state, the mental state depends on your digestion. Your skin and your eyes will be clear, and your teeth will be whiter. You'll be amazed at how when your digestion improves, your teeth look better. And yes, teeth are living matter. They change day to day. And you will also shed any excess weight. You may not need to, but you will shed any excess weight, whether it be water or fat. And you'll also feel lighter in the body, in the physical body, and more energetic day to day. This is the aim. We know that the cleanse is working when this is how you feel. That's the outcome. And most importantly, there are no costly supplements. There's nothing to buy. So once you do this, basically what we're using is things that you already have in your kitchen, or things that you can easily buy in a grocery store, or perhaps in some cases at the Indian grocer. And at the very most, it might be online, but it's very rarely will you need anything that you don't already have. And anything that you don't already have is also optional. You don't have to buy anything else. This is one of the things that I appreciate the most about Ayurveda. It's the most sustainable, and it's also available to anybody. It doesn't require any major investment. And so basically what you have already, perhaps plus maybe a tongue scraper, which is nowadays quite widely available. I've discovered them here in Brussels in a couple of health food stores here. Neti Pot, same thing. You can invest in one of those if you especially have kapha tendencies. That's really worth investing in. That's a jala neti. This is to put the saline water through the nose, for example, to help clear out the sinus cavity. These might be things that you'd like to buy, but there's absolutely no need. If you can also do, for example, neti just by scooping water up in the palm of your hand and pouring it through the nostril. So there's no need to actually buy anything, and you can scrape your tongue with the back of your toothbrush. So again, my enthusiasm for Ayurveda is manifold, because it is one of the most perfect health options for our times. And so the program that we're looking at, the program that we would be doing together, includes these kinds of sessions that I'm doing right now, which is weekly instruction, which has part instruction, part theory. So we look at the principles, and that every week will be about 90 minutes per session. And then there's also about a 1 hour question and answer session. I say 1 hour, but it's however long it needs to be. As long as the questions keep coming, we keep answering them. And then in between that time, there are pre-recorded videos that I was able to make the last time I did the cleanse. So everything to do with how to do neti, for example, how to do basti, which is an enema, which is a really helpful thing, for example, for high vata, issues around what kinds of food to choose, how to mix spices, for example, the qualities of spices and so on. So in the 28-day program, all of that is quite comprehensive. In the 14-day program, it is comprehensive, but in a more limited way, of course, because we can't do all of that in the 14 days. So it will be what's necessary for you to know, plus the basic principles that help you keep going forward. And then there's going to be yoga classes as well that are 1 hour a week, and those can be pre-recorded or live, depending on the week. And then also a private WhatsApp group. So we found the last time that we did this, that the group was very interactive. It was a really wonderful support, and each member of the group was really helpful in terms of supporting each other, giving ideas, sharing pictures of whatever was coming up for them, their breakfast or whatever. And I found that to be a really wonderful support for me as well, because I was able to see how people were doing as they were going through the cleanse. I was able to see kind of day by day, for those who wanted to say something, how they were doing without having to sit down for an appointment with them. You'll also receive support materials like recipes, for example, and some explanatory PDFs, as well as guided meditations. We're going to look at things like mindful eating, for example. So I guide you in a meditation for mindful eating. And then there'll be questionnaires as well. This is on a teaching platform, so there'll be questionnaires that will reinforce what you've learned, because it's important to be able to regurgitate what you hear, to be able to say and understand, articulate what it is that you've just learned, so that you really know that you've integrated that. And then as an option, previously I did it as a part of the cleanse, but this time I'm doing it as an option, because some people don't really need a special consultation. But for those who want to, if you're new to this, or if you have perhaps a health condition that you want a little more advice on, we can meet individually, and I offer a special rate for a shorter but a cheaper session with me, because quite a lot of the information that you really need is already in the program. So you can absolutely do the program without an individual consultation. So we're going to look also at psychospiritual causes of imbalance. This is, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's an important thing to understand, so that we're looking at the subtle body and how the subtle body is impacting the gross body as we become in or out of balance. And then mindful eating, as I mentioned before, is a part of this. And then the psychology of food, because once we start to move into changing certain food groups, or working with food addictions, for example, or restricting food, and at a certain point even perhaps not taking food or doing a mono diet, that can bring up some deeper psychology around food, because some people have been educated through many, many years to comfort eat, for example, or issues of, for example, I was raised in a household, we were told to clean our plates. We couldn't leave the table if we didn't empty everything off our plate. And even to the point that we would have to eat even if we weren't hungry. And that causes some psychological consequences as you go through the rest of your life. And we'll look at all of that. And so the sessions work through several phases, especially over the 4-week program. We begin the cleanse at the new moon, which is coming up this Tuesday. There's another one happening at the new moon in October, so that will be a month afterwards. And then our first session will look at how to simplify daily life as much as we can. What we should stop eating, what we should start eating. What we don't eat, by the way, is as important as what we eat. So it's really important to become more discerning with the food that we take, how we eat, and so on. And then what to change for the month ahead. So the first week is going to be very much about doing some housekeeping. Of course, that's going to be accelerated. It will be a much shorter period for the 2-week session. That will be a very brief intro into how to change diet and so on, because the 2-week session is going to be that much less profound, just given the time difference. And then through week 1, we slowly introduce intermittent fasting, which I'll explain very deeply in the course, and how you can arrange the timing of your meals without even changing what you eat to get the benefit out of what you eat and have um, an effect of, for example, of already losing weight, already feeling more energy, already feeling your digestion is improving, all just by changing the timing of when you eat. And then we'll look, of course, at special diets according to your needs. And then at the full moon, which is the peak of the program, I always work with the lunar cycles whenever I can. So we start with the energy of the new moon, building up to the full moon. And at the full moon, as many people in India already know, there is a tendency to prefer not to eat. So the fasting at the full moon is quite a common thing. People always do that. And yet the way that we're talking about fasting is not necessarily abstinence from food. And so fasting in the Ayurvedic sense or in the traditional Indian way is to reduce certain foods. So you eliminate certain things from the diet, but you would maintain, for example, fruit and nuts or vegetables and dal, for example. But you would take away grains, for example, or anything sugary, or you can fast with just milk, or, there's lots of different ways to do that. And I will guide you through all of that as well. And so there will be some variation of a fast or a mono diet at that stage where we eat only one type of food to simplify the diet. And then after that, we come back into eating again. So of course, after a fast, you need to re-emerge in a way that's very conscious, that is beneficial for digestion, so that you don't disturb the digestion when you're coming back into eating. And we take our time with that. This will be done to a lesser extent in the 2-week program. So again, the 2-week program will be slightly minimized compared to the 28-day program. And yet we do the same kinds of things. So we still have this same kind of energy of gearing down and then gearing back up again in the second half. And then certainly by the end of our time together, you will have a solid daily routine, because your daily routine, of course, now is very, very important to sustaining your good health. And you'll know how to rebalance yourself when you go out of balance and whenever that will be necessary, because it will be necessary. You will always go in and out of balance. That's the nature of being human. And as long as you have this body and it's breathing, you will always be going in and out of balance. So it's good to know how to do that, and then how to enjoy your happy and healthy body, and you will certainly feel that difference coming out of the program. And so the 28-day cleanse is $295 for the entire course. That includes all that I've listed above, all of the different sessions and the PDFs and everything that you'll need, and our Q&A sessions and so on. And if you join with a friend, you both will get 10% off, so that you have a buddy system. It worked really well for 2 people, actually 6 people last time. There were 2 couples, 2 married couples, and 2 friends who did it in the previous cleanse. And it's quite good, because then you're changing in the household, which is quite nice. Everybody's then participating in a similar way. And among friends, of course, you just get to cheer each other on. So it makes it all the easier. And of course, if there is any financial need of any kind, you can always ask me about a reduced rate. I'd be very happy either to spread out payments or to reduce the rate as needed. For the 14-day cleanse, it's $155 for 2 weeks. Both of these prices, given the number of hours that you're going to get, so in the 28-day cleanse, it's roughly 27 hours of information that's either live or by video. In the 14-day cleanse, it's going to be roughly 12 to 14 hours, depending on how many hours we spend together and things like Q&A. But either way, it's a substantial amount of time and knowledge for this amount of money, because I charge normally 75 euros per session for an hour and a quarter session, and we can't cover nearly as much ground in an individual session. So it's a really good value for money, getting quite personalized service as well. And then if you'd like to register, I know some of you have already done so, and thank you already if you have. To register and for payment details, you can go to my website, which is called nurturingtransformation.com, and go to the page that is called Ayurvedic Home Cleanse. It's in courses, and you'll find Ayurvedic Home Cleanse listed there. And you'll find all the information you need there. And otherwise, I will also be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to this, and that you can also forward to other people if you're interested. And that link will have other details of payment and so on for you. And then just to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you also for taking good care of your health, because when we each take care of our good health, then everybody wins. Our society wins in general, because when we're all in good health, the rest of us benefit. So as we've seen with COVID, it's important that we take good care of each other and especially ourselves. So thanks for staying with me. For those who are still here, if you want, you can flip on your video again. Just know that you're being recorded. If you are not wanting to be on the recording, you should keep your video off. And thanks, Maria. Thank you. I know you already registered, so that's lovely. And so Jaya had to go. So thanks so much, Rashmi. I'm going to hire you for my assistant next time.
Well, you know, I just happen to know one or two things, and they were necessary for you. But
Yeah.
really, Susan, this was fantastic.
Thank you.
You have all my admiration, because I would love to do this cleanse, but I do. You know, I'm a health coach myself.
Super. Yeah.
And so I wanted to know, when is the October 7th? Is that October 6th? Is that
Yes.
the 2-week cleanse?
So that would be the next 28-day cleanse. And in the meantime, then after that, there's going to be another one that is 14 days. So all
after the 28.
Yeah. So there's two 28-day cleanses and two 14-day cleanses, one in each month, basically, in each month. And
so for example, September 7th would
that's a 28-day session.
Okay, and when would be the 14 days?
Yeah, the 14 days then begins after that on the 14th. And we then go until the end. So we're doing it from the full moon to the following new moon after that. So each time I try to work with the moon, because it's interesting energy when you work with the moon. You can use the initiation energy of the new moon cycle. You can use the shedding energy of the full moon cycle. And when we mark something in that way with the lunar cycle, it also helps to imprint something in us. It connects us to nature. Yes. And it helps to connect us to something a little bit bigger. Yeah. And it just sets a kind of a context for relating in a different way to your life. And so as much as I can, I try to use these lunar schedules whenever I do something like this.
So for me, I think I would really be very interested in doing the 14-day. Sure. Because I have a lot going on.
Yeah, the 14-day is great, because you will still be able to do quite a lot, and that also.
And I
already know quite a lot.
I know a lot, and I have Dinacharya myself. And
right. Yeah.
So that
aspect is not really necessary for you. Then.
Yeah. But for me, what's really what I loved the way you explained the 6 stages of illness, and I also liked how you very beautifully went in from how Vata and Pitta and Kapha just so naturally manifest in our bodies. Yeah, I really thought you did that fantastic, very well. That's really kind.
Thank you. Yeah. And it is something that's very natural. So this is what I want to emphasize, that people understand. These are not sort of random foreign concepts. These are actually natural phenomena that we can, as a short form, we give it a word, we give it a name, because it's very helpful. Once we understand the principle, we can keep using the name instead of having to describe the process. Right. But it's very natural. Yeah, you know this already. Yes.
So I would really like to do that. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. So should I just register?
So you can. There is a way to register. I'm just going to put the link in the chat box. I'll put the link where you can already register and find out more information. All of the dates are there, and you can directly register and pay there. Yeah. And so Agnes, both and Valerie and Agnes have the question of when will we meet live? And so that depends on the day of the cleanse. But what I've been doing is it's the first day of each cleanse that we start to meet. So for example, in the one that begins on Tuesday the 7th, we will start to meet on Tuesday. That's our live session. And then every Tuesday after that. And then the Q&A session would be on a Saturday. So the Tuesday session would be roughly this time. So it would be 7 in the evening. When you register, it's all indicated as well. The timings are indicated. 7 in the evening until 8:30 or 9, depending on how much time we need. We have Q&A time after the live session as well. And then for the Q&A session, what worked really well last time was to do it Saturday mornings. Because most people are available at that time. But obviously, if you're in Phoenix, that's not going to work for you. It's too early for you. But we can
I'm in
adapt.
Vienna. I'm in Vienna.
I'm sorry, yeah, Vienna. So it was not you, but Jaya was in Phoenix.
Yeah, but so you're, it's Saturday morning Central.
Saturday morning. So last time what we did was 10:30 until noon on a Saturday morning.
Great.
Because we had such a big group, we had 20 people, then we needed quite a lot of time. With a smaller group, we could easily find an hour to do it. I just stay until the questions evaporate, basically. So it's more the starting time that we're worried about. So that's basically for the 28-day cleanse. And the following one, the 14-day cleanse, then is on the Wednesday. It starts on the Wednesday. And so we do then the Wednesday, and then we keep the schedule going from Wednesday to Wednesday. That way we can mark also the different times. And that means that in the 14-day session, for example, we have 3 meetings. We have the first day, the middle, and then at the end to wrap it up. And in the 28-day session, we have 5. So over the 4 weeks, we have 5 of these live meetings and then 4 Q&As. So Agnes, did you have another question about that?
Yes. So the first session is on Tuesday, this Tuesday, but unfortunately and exceptionally, I won't be available, on Tuesday evening. So I suppose I think you mentioned that you're going to record the session, and I'll be able to listen to it on
always. So
Wednesday
everything
morning.
will be everything will be recorded. Whatever we do is going to be recorded. And that will go on the same platform where there are already videos, where there are already where there's already course information. And so as you go through the cycle day by day, week by week, you'll have access to all of the live things as well as the extra things. And for the ones that are not live, you do them in your own time.
Okay.
So there's
actually, I trust you for being very well organized to let us access all this material and information.
It's certainly my intention. We'll see if it works out. Yeah. So even the Q&A and Valerie, so everything is recorded. And of course, that all stays within the group, right? And so these recordings don't get put up on YouTube and things like that. So all of that is private, and that's where you get to ask your questions, because if you're starting to talk about something like Basti or constipation, we want to know that we're going to be what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So so it's very discreet, very private, but all of you will always have access to what is there on the platform. And on the first day of the session, whichever session you join, you will get the login details for the platform, as well as the login details for the Zoom meeting for the very first day. And then any other information that you might need. There is a health questionnaire that I'll be sending out to all registrants as well, because that health questionnaire is really important for both of us. It gives us a context. I see what's going on in your life, and also it gives you an opportunity to reflect on what's been going on in your life. And that starts from the very beginning. How were you born? Were you born by cesarean? Were you born naturally? Were you breastfed? And all of these kinds of things are in the health questionnaire. And so what else do I need to tell you? I think I've covered everything from my point of view. One question that came up in the previous session, which I think is really helpful for people to think about, is from somebody who has a lot of experience in doing this kind of thing. She said, will I have enough energy to still work, to do my day-to-day stuff while I do this? And the answer is yes. So on the one hand, I'm asking you to pare back and scale back day-to-day activities that are not necessary, so that you simplify your life. That's also going to be ideally a longer-term choice as well, that you really look at activities and decide to what extent you may or may not need to do certain things, or at least not in the frenetic pace that you might have. And yet at the same time, our food is very nutritious. So even if you're reducing quantity, and even if you're reducing the timings of meals, the food is extremely nutritious. And the idea is that you're getting more nutritional impact, your digestion is improving, this will give you more energy. And so often we equate eating more food with having more energy. And in fact, the opposite is often true. So by regularly consuming food, we actually become more tired, because we have these then peaks and troughs of blood sugar, and we destabilize ourselves. We become so much of our energy is spent on thinking about food and preparing food and shopping for food and then digesting the food, that we're actually wasting all of the energy that we could be using creatively in other areas of life. Sylvia, did you have a question?
Hi. Yes.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I think I know already the answer because of the calendar that you have just shared. But my question was indeed whether we can start with a 14-day program, and then if we feel strong enough, then move forward with 28. But I don't think it's feasible, isn't it? Because
it's kind of, I mean, technically you could, and I would say only you, in the sense that you've already done the cleanse. So I know you, and I know you could do it, but it's not, I'm not sure that it would be necessary. Really.
Okay.
I think the 14-day cleanse for you especially would be sufficient. The difference would be if you wanted to have that regular contact, you know, the regular program over a longer period of time.
Okay, because I was indeed interested in the 14-1, because as you know, for me it was very challenging the 28 when we did it last time, but definitely at least the 14, I'm on it. 100%.
I think it's good for you. It's enough. First of all, it's enough. You're in good health, and all of it touches all of the main points. And now that you've done the 28-day cleanse, you also know the principles really well. So you don't need to have all of that again. So I think it should be enough for you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And the calendar is in your
baby's now a
website.
year or something, right? So that also makes life a little easier.
The baby, yeah, yes, more or less.
Yeah. It's new problems.
Yes, it's new
situation.
problem, indeed. Yeah. But tonight we had your soup, you know, with all the spicy things. So we still carry on the good things that we learned.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, the food is worth coming back for.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. Okay.
Right.
Are there any other questions?
Okay.
So I think that's it then from my side. I'm always here, obviously, if you want to send me an email if you still have some questions. So thank you, Agnes, for being here. That's lovely. I'm glad you can join us. And so I look forward to seeing you whenever I can. So thank you, everyone, and reach out if you need to have any more information. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
Susan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.